The small town was waking up to the soft golden glow of morning. Birds chirped between the narrow streets, and the faint smell of frying bread from a nearby bakery drifted through the air. At the heart of the town, tucked between a shuttered grocery store and an old cobbler's shop, was a modest car repair garage. Rusted signs swung gently in the breeze, and the faint smell of oil and rubber clung to the walls. Inside, Ravi, a young mechanic with grease-streaked hands and a stained apron, was already at work. His hands moved with practiced precision, tightening a bolt here, adjusting a tire there. Despite his skill, his eyes betrayed a gentleness and patience rarely seen in such a harsh, profit-driven environment. He worked not for glory, nor for wealth, but for the simple satisfaction of helping people. The bell above the door jingled, and in came an elderly woman, her posture stooped under the weight of years, a faded shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her eyes, rimmed with worry, scanned the room until they settled on Ravi. She clutched her handbag tightly, and with a trembling voice, she explained her plight. Her old sedan, once her husband's pride, had broken down on the way to the market. She had no money for repairs, and without the car, she couldn't buy groceries or reach the doctor's clinic. Ravi wiped his hands on a rag and leaned down to look at the car. The engine was sputtering, smoke curling from the hood. "Don't worry, ma'am," he said softly, his eyes kind. "I'll fix it for you." At that moment, Mr. Khanna, the shop owner, appeared in the doorway of his office. His stern eyes narrowed as he watched Ravi kneeling by the old car. "Ravi, what are you doing?" he barked. "You can't just work for free. That's business, not charity." Ravi looked up, unfazed by the anger in his boss's voice. "Sometimes, sir, people need help more than we need profit," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. As Ravi worked, neighbors passing by stopped to watch. Children peered through the windows, fascinated by the mechanic who moved as if the car's health mattered more than money. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and his fingers were smeared with grease, but he worked patiently, whispering comforting words to the old car as if it could hear him. Hours passed, and finally, with a satisfied grin, Ravi slammed the hood shut. The engine roared to life, steady and strong. The old lady's eyes welled up with tears, and she hugged him tightly. "God bless you, young man," she whispered. Ravi simply nodded, wiping his hands and feeling a quiet warmth in his chest, unaware that this small act of kindness would soon ignite a storm he couldn't have imagined. The morning sun had climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the dusty street outside the garage. Inside, the air smelled heavier than usual, thick with the tension that hung like a storm cloud. Mr. Khanna sat behind his cluttered desk, tapping his fingers impatiently, his face flushed with anger. Every time Ravi's name crossed his mind, his chest tightened. Finally, he slammed his hand on the desk. "Ravi, get in here," he roared. The sound made the old tools on the wall tremble. Ravi, still wiping grease from his hands, approached calmly, sensing the storm brewing. "Yes, sir," he asked quietly. Mr. Khanna's eyes blazed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? That old woman, her car, you fixed it for free. Are you insane?" His voice rose with each word, echoing off the corrugated metal walls. Ravi met his gaze steadily. "Sir, she needed help. She has no other way to get around, no money. I just did what I could." "Did what you could?" Mr. Khanna's voice cracked with fury. "You did what you wanted, Ravi. This is a business, not a charity. Every minute you spent on that worthless heap of metal is money out of this shop." He stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. The metal legs scraped loudly against the concrete floor. Ravi's stomach tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "Sir, I know you value profit, and I respect that. But sometimes people need kindness more than money." Mr. Khanna's face twisted with disbelief and rage. "Kindness," he shouted, pointing a trembling finger. "You're fired. Pack your tools, leave this shop, and don't ever come back." For a moment, Ravi froze, the words hanging in the air like a sudden storm. His chest felt tight, but he didn't argue. He knew reasoning with a man blinded by greed would achieve nothing. Slowly, he nodded. "I understand," he said, his voice quiet but steady. He turned and walked toward the workbench, methodically packing his tools into his worn leather bag. Every motion was calm, controlled, but inside, a mixture of sadness and frustration churned. Outside, the old lady had been waiting, peeking through the window, tears welling in her eyes as she watched the mechanic who had saved her life now face injustice. By the time Ravi stepped out of the garage, the whispers had already started. Neighbors, who had witnessed his act of kindness, exchanged shocked glances. Word traveled fast, too fast for Mr. Khanna's liking. Ravi's quiet dignity stood in stark contrast to the boss's fury, and for the first time, it seemed that this one man's generosity might spark something far bigger than a single act of charity. As Ravi walked down the dusty street, the sun glinting off the tools in his bag, he didn't look back. He had lost a job, yes, but he had not lost his integrity. And in the shadows of that small town, a storm was beginning to gather. News of Ravi's dismissal spread like wildfire through the small town. By the next morning, whispers had become conversations, conversations had become debates, and debates had turned into a collective anger that simmered in every corner. At the local tea stall, men sipped chai and shook their heads. "Can you believe Khanna fired him? Just for helping that old lady?" One man exclaimed, slamming his cup down. Another nodded, his face dark with indignation. "A man who works his hands to the bone, and this is how he's treated. Shameful." Meanwhile, the elderly woman, still clutching her repaired car keys, went from neighbor to neighbor, recounting the story with a trembling voice. He could have asked for money, but he said he wanted to help, she told anyone who would listen. He didn't care about profit. He only cared about people. Word of the incident quickly reached social media. Photos of the repaired car, screenshots of the old lady's grateful message, and small videos of Ravi working tirelessly began circulating online. Within hours, the story went viral. People across the region expressed outrage at Mr. Khanna's decision. Hashtags like #justice for Ravi and #kindness over profit trended, while messages of support poured in from strangers, praising Ravi's integrity. Ravi, meanwhile, remained humble and quiet. He accepted temporary work at a neighboring garage, but he refused to be distracted by the growing attention. When a reporter approached him, camera in hand, he simply said, "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was right." His calm, honest demeanor only fueled the public's admiration. The backlash against Mr. Khanna's shop was immediate and devastating. Customers, who had once lined up for his services, began to disappear. Some left angry notes on the door, others refused to enter when passing by. Business slowed to a crawl, and whispers of boycott spread across the town like wildfire. Neighbors and local business owners, inspired by Ravi's courage, began offering support. Donations came in, tools, spare parts, even financial contributions, to help him start his own small garage. It wasn't charity for charity's sake, it was a vote of confidence in a man whose integrity had touched their hearts. Through it all, Ravi maintained his quiet strength. He knew that wealth and recognition were temporary, but respect and trust lasted a lifetime. As the days passed, the town's outrage transformed into action, and slowly but surely, a plan began to take shape. A new garage, a new beginning, and a space where honesty, skill, and compassion would be valued above profit. And somewhere in the background, Mr. Khanna watched helplessly as the community he had taken for granted turned against him, realizing far too late that greed could never win against genuine kindness. Weeks had passed since Ravi had left Mr. Khanna's garage. The town, once quiet and routine, now buzzed with stories of the humble mechanic whose act of kindness had ignited a movement. Flyers announcing the opening of Ravi's new garage were pinned to walls, shared on social media, and whispered among neighbors. The word was clear, a new chapter was beginning. Ravi's garage stood at the edge of town, small but sturdy, with freshly painted walls and a hand-painted sign above the entrance. Ravi's garage, honesty first. He had spent countless hours preparing it, working late into the night, patching leaks, organizing tools, and even painting a small mural of a car being repaired with care, an homage to the principle that had guided him through everything. On the morning of the grand opening, the street was alive with excitement. Townspeople poured in from every corner, children clinging to their parents' hands, neighbors carrying flowers, and even a few local journalists eager to witness the moment. The elderly woman, who had been at the center of Ravi's story, arrived first, driving her restored sedan with a proud smile. She had brought a small bouquet of bright marigolds as a token of gratitude. Ravi stepped forward to greet everyone, his hands slightly calloused but steady. "Welcome," he said, voice calm but filled with emotion. "This isn't just my garage. It's a place where everyone is treated fairly and where doing the right thing matters more than the money in your pocket." The crowd erupted into applause. People who had once feared speaking up against unfair practices now cheered freely, celebrating not just the opening of a business, but the triumph of integrity and kindness. Ravi's former colleagues, and even a few skeptical townsfolk, watched quietly, realizing that true respect could never be bought. Meanwhile, across town, Mr. Khanna's shop struggled. His customers had dwindled, angry messages lingered online, and his once confident demeanor had given way to a quiet despair. The contrast between the failing business and Ravi's thriving new garage was unmistakable. As the day progressed, Ravi worked alongside his team, fixing cars, sharing stories, and laughing with the community. The elderly woman returned later, hugging him tightly. "You didn't just fix my car," she said softly, tears glistening in her eyes. "You reminded all of us what it means to be human." Ravi smiled, feeling a warmth he had never known. His hands, once covered in grease and sweat, now felt lighter, not because the work was easier, but because it was meaningful. By evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the streets glowed with the soft light of lanterns. Ravi stood outside his garage, looking at the cars lined up and the people chatting happily around him. He had lost a job, yes, but he had gained a life filled with purpose, respect, and community. And in that small town, everyone knew the truth. Kindness, integrity, and selflessness were more powerful than greed, and those who choose to do good often find the greatest rewards, not in money, but in the hearts they touch.